The airport lounge was buzzing with the usual chaos of travelers rushing to catch their flights, but I sat there frozen, my hands gripping the armrest so tight my knuckles turned white. Across from me, my husband Daniel was speaking in rapid German to his business partner Klaus, both of them laughing like they were sharing the funniest joke in the world. They had no idea I understood every single word they were saying. And what I heard in those next few minutes would shatter the life I thought I knew and set in motion a revenge so calculated, so perfectly executed, that even I would be surprised by how far I was willing to go. My name is Sophie, and for 8 years I believed I had the perfect marriage. Daniel was charming, successful, attentive, everything a woman could want in a husband. We met at a charity gala in Chicago where he was representing his investment firm and I was there with my publishing company. He swept me off my feet with his European sophistication, his accent, his attention to detail. Within a year we were married, and I thought I had found my forever. But as I sat in that airport lounge pretending to scroll through my phone while listening to him describe me as his stupid American wife who would never figure out what he was really doing, I realized my entire marriage had been built on lies I was too blind to see. You see, what Daniel didn't know was that my grandmother was German. She came to America after the war and insisted on teaching me her language from the time I was 5 years old. Every summer I spent with her, we spoke nothing but German. She made me read German books, watch German films, even think in German. By the time I was a teenager, I was fluent, but after she passed away when I was 20, I rarely used it. My German became my secret language, something I kept to myself, a private connection to the grandmother I loved. When I met Daniel and he told me he was from Munich, I never mentioned that I spoke his language. It just never came up in those early romantic days, and later, well, I guess I liked having something that was just mine. Now, as I sat there listening to him tell Klaus about how easy it was to manipulate me, how I signed every document he put in front of me without reading it, how my inheritance from my parents went straight into accounts I didn't even know existed, I felt something inside me crack and then harden into something cold and sharp. This wasn't just about infidelity or lying. This was systematic, calculated theft and betrayal of the worst kind. And he thought I was too stupid, too trusting, too American to ever figure it out. Klaus asked him if he was worried I would discover the truth, and Daniel actually laughed. He said I was so focused on my little book projects and my charity work that I barely paid attention to anything he did. He said I was the perfect wife for his purposes, wealthy enough to provide the capital he needed, trusting enough to never ask questions, and naive enough to believe every word he said. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. He told Klaus that once the final transfer went through next month, he would have everything he needed and could finally be done with this charade. Klaus asked what he meant, and Daniel said he was planning to disappear, leave me with nothing but debt and confusion while he started his new life in the Cayman Islands with the money he had been systematically stealing from me for years. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not where he could see. Instead, I stood up calmly, told him I was going to the restroom, and walked away on legs that somehow still worked even though my entire world was collapsing. In the bathroom, I locked myself in a stall and finally let myself feel the full weight of what I had just learned. The man I loved, the man I trusted with everything, had been planning to destroy me from the very beginning. Our entire marriage was nothing but a con, and I was the mark. But as I stood there shaking with rage and heartbreak, something shifted inside me. I thought about my grandmother, how she survived a war, how she rebuilt her life in a foreign country, how she taught me to be strong and smart and never let anyone underestimate me because of my gender or my kindness. And I realized that Daniel had made one critical mistake. He underestimated me. He thought I was weak and stupid and blind, but he was wrong. I was none of those things. I was just a woman who had chosen to trust and love, and now that trust was shattered. There was nothing holding me back from becoming something he never expected. I washed my face, fixed my makeup, and walked back to the lounge with a smile on my face. Daniel looked up from his phone and asked if I was okay. I told him I was perfect, just a little tired from all the travel planning. He squeezed my hand and said we would rest on the plane, that this trip to Germany would be good for us. I smiled and nodded, playing the role of the devoted wife one last time, while inside my mind was already racing through possibilities and plans. Because now I knew the truth, and the truth was power. The question was how to use it. The flight to Munich was 7 hours of pure torture. Daniel slept peacefully beside me, occasionally reaching over to hold my hand or rest his head on my shoulder, these small gestures of affection that I now knew were completely hollow. I couldn't sleep. Instead, I stared out the window at the darkness and clouds and began to formulate my plan. I had one advantage that Daniel didn't know about. My understanding of German meant I could access information and conversations he thought were hidden from me, but I needed more than that. I needed evidence, documentation, proof of what he had done. And I needed to do this carefully because if he suspected I knew anything, he would accelerate his timeline and disappear before I could stop him. When we landed in Munich, Daniel was immediately on his phone arranging meetings and dinners. We were staying at a luxury hotel in the city center, supposedly so he could finalize some business deals while I enjoyed the sights and did some shopping. Looking back now, I realized this entire trip was probably the final stage of his plan, the last transfers and arrangements before he vanished. But now, instead of being his oblivious victim, I was going to be his worst nightmare. The first day I played my part perfectly. I went shopping on Maximilianstrasse, had coffee at expensive cafes, took pictures of the beautiful architecture and sent them to my friends back home. But while I was doing all of this, I was also paying attention to everything in a way I never had before. At dinner that night with Klaus and several other business associates, I sat quietly and smiled while they spoke in German, discussing investments and transfers and accounts. They thought I couldn't understand them, so they were careless, and every word they said gave me more pieces of the puzzle I was assembling. I learned that Daniel had created a complex web of shell companies and offshore accounts, all funded with money he had taken from me over the years. He had forged my signature on documents, used my inheritance as collateral for loans he never intended to pay back, and even taken out insurance policies in my name that would pay out to him if something happened to me. That last part made my blood run cold. Was he actually planning to do something to me, or was it just another layer of his financial scheme? Either way, it confirmed that I needed to act fast. After that dinner, I told Daniel I had a headache and went back to our hotel room. Once I was alone, I started searching through his things. His laptop was password protected, but I knew him well enough to guess it on the third try. My birthday, because even con men need easy passwords to remember. What I found in his files was worse than I imagined. Spreadsheets tracking every penny he had taken from me, emails with lawyers in the Cayman Islands setting up his new identity, and most damning of all, a detailed timeline for his disappearance scheduled for 3 weeks from now. I photographed everything with my phone, uploaded it all to a secure cloud storage, and then carefully put everything back exactly as I had found it. My hands were shaking the entire time, partly from fear of being caught but mostly from rage at how thoroughly he had planned to destroy me. But I couldn't let emotion cloud my judgment now. I needed to think clearly and move carefully, because I wasn't just going to stop him. I was going to make sure he lost everything he had stolen and more. The next morning I told Daniel I wanted to visit some museums and take a walking tour of the old city. He seemed relieved to have time for his meetings without me, kissed me on the forehead, and told me to enjoy myself. Instead of sightseeing, I went straight to the American Embassy. I had done my research during the sleepless hours of the previous night and knew that what Daniel had done constituted international financial fraud. But I also knew that going to the authorities too soon might spook him into running before they could build a case. I needed to be smart about this. At the embassy, I met with a consular officer and explained my situation. I showed her some of the evidence I had gathered and told her I needed help, but I also needed to do this carefully so my husband wouldn't escape justice. She listened carefully and then connected me with an FBI agent who specialized in international financial crimes. His name was Agent Morrison, and he was in Munich working on a different case, but agreed to meet with me that afternoon. Agent Morrison was everything I needed him to be: professional, thorough, and most importantly, willing to work with me rather than just taking over the investigation. I showed him everything I had found and told him about the conversation I had overheard at the airport. He asked me if I was absolutely certain I wanted to go through with this, that once we started down this path there would be no going back. My marriage would be over, my husband would likely go to prison, and my life would be turned upside down in ways I couldn't predict. I looked him straight in the eye and told him that my marriage was already over. It had been a lie from the beginning, and all I wanted now was justice and to get back what was mine. We worked out a plan together. I would continue to act normal, continue to be the trusting wife while Agent Morrison and his team gathered evidence and worked with German authorities to freeze Daniel's accounts and prepare arrest warrants. They needed me to get access to more of his files, to record conversations, to essentially become an informant against my own husband. It was dangerous and terrifying, and exactly what I needed to do. Over the next week, I became someone I barely recognized. During the day, I smiled and played the devoted wife, went to dinners and events, made small talk with Daniel's business associates, and pretended I didn't understand the German conversations happening around me. But at night while Daniel slept, I copied files from his computer, photographed documents from his briefcase, and even managed to clone his phone so the FBI could monitor his communications. I felt like a spy in my own marriage, which I suppose I was. Daniel noticed nothing. He was so confident in my stupidity, so certain I would never question him, that he didn't see what was happening right under his nose. He even started to get careless, leaving documents out in the open, taking phone calls in front of me in German where he discussed his plans. Each piece of information I gathered was another nail in the coffin he was building for himself, and I made sure every single one was driven home perfectly. The breakthrough came during a dinner party at Klaus's house. Daniel had too much to drink and started bragging to his friends about how easy it had been to fool me, how American women were so desperate for European charm that they would believe anything. He told them about forging my signature, about the shell companies, about how he was going to disappear in 2 weeks with over $15 million that I didn't even know was missing. His friends laughed and congratulated him on his successful con. And I sat there with a glass of wine in my hand, smiling and nodding like I didn't understand a word, while the recording device in my purse captured every syllable. That night I met with Agent Morrison and his team at a safe location. I gave them the recording and they told me it was exactly what they needed. They had been building their case, but that recording was the confession that tied everything together. They told me they were ready to move, that within 48 hours they would execute arrest warrants on Daniel and several of his associates, including Klaus. They asked me if I was prepared for what was about to happen, if I had somewhere safe to stay, if I understood that the next few days would be intense and difficult. I told them I was ready for all of it. But before we moved forward with the arrests, I had one more thing I needed to do. I needed to secure my own assets and make sure that even if something went wrong with the legal case, I wouldn't be left with nothing. With Agent Morrison's help, I contacted my bank back in Chicago and had them freeze all accounts that Daniel had access to. I called my lawyer and had her draw up divorce papers citing fraud and deception. I transferred the remaining money in our joint accounts to a new account in only my name. And I contacted every credit card company and financial institution we had dealt with to report that I was a victim of identity theft and fraud. Daniel was so focused on his final preparations to disappear that he didn't notice any of this happening. He thought he had 2 more weeks to cover his tracks and make his exit, but he actually had less than 2 days before his entire world collapsed. And I was going to make sure I was there to see it happen. The day of the arrest, I got up early and packed a small bag with my important documents, some clothes, and the few pieces of jewelry that had belonged to my grandmother. I left everything else behind because none of it mattered anymore. Daniel woke up in a good mood, excited about a meeting he had scheduled for that afternoon that he thought would be the final piece of his plan. He kissed me goodbye and told me he loved me. I looked at him and said I loved him too, and for just a moment I let him see something in my eyes that made him pause. But then I smiled and the moment passed, and he left for his meeting thinking everything was going exactly as planned. I waited in a cafe across from the building where Daniel's meeting was scheduled. Agent Morrison had told me I didn't need to be there, that I could wait somewhere safe and he would call me when it was done. But I needed to see this. I needed to watch the moment when Daniel realized his perfect con had been turned against him. So I sat there with a cup of coffee I couldn't drink and watched the entrance to that building like my life depended on it. At exactly 2 in the afternoon, unmarked police cars pulled up to the building. German police in plain clothes entered quickly and efficiently. 15 minutes later, they came out with Daniel in handcuffs. I watched from across the street as he was led to one of the cars, his face a mask of shock and confusion. He was looking around frantically, probably trying to figure out what had gone wrong, where the leak had come from, how his perfect plan had fallen apart. And then, for just a second, his eyes scanned across the street and landed on me. I was standing now, no longer hiding, and I let him see me fully. I wanted him to know. I wanted him to understand who had done this to him. The recognition in his eyes was everything I needed. The shock, the disbelief, the sudden understanding that I had never been the stupid American wife he thought I was. He started shouting something, but the police pushed him into the car and drove away, and just like that, the man who had tried to destroy me was gone. I stood there shaking, tears finally falling freely, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief and release, and something that felt almost like freedom. Agent Morrison approached me carefully and asked if I was okay. I told him I was better than okay. I was finally seeing clearly for the first time in years. He told me that Klaus and 2 other associates had also been arrested, that they had seized computers and documents that would provide even more evidence against them. The charges would include wire fraud, identity theft, money laundering, and a dozen other crimes that would likely put Daniel away for 20 years or more. He asked if I wanted to press charges for the forged documents and stolen money. I told him I wanted every charge possible filed against him. No mercy, no second chances, no opportunity for him to talk his way out of this the way he had talked his way into my life. Over the next few weeks, the full extent of Daniel's crimes came to light. It turned out I wasn't his first victim. He had run similar cons on 2 other women before me, both of whom he had married, stolen from, and abandoned. But I was supposed to be his biggest score, the one that would set him up for life. The authorities in 3 countries were now building cases against him, and the evidence we had gathered made it almost impossible for him to mount any kind of defense. I filed for divorce immediately on grounds of fraud. My lawyer was excellent, and the case was straightforward given all the evidence. Within 2 months, the divorce was finalized, and by some miracle and a lot of hard work from legal teams on 2 continents, I managed to recover most of the money he had stolen from me. The shell companies were dissolved, the offshore accounts were seized, and every penny that could be traced back to me was returned. I wouldn't get everything back, some of it was gone forever, but I got enough to rebuild my life and restore my financial security. But the money was never the point. This was about something bigger than dollars and cents. This was about taking back my power from someone who thought he could steal it from me. This was about proving that kindness and trust are not the same as weakness and stupidity. This was about showing that you can love someone completely and still be strong enough to destroy them when they betray you. The trial was long and difficult. I had to testify about the intimate details of my marriage, about how thoroughly I had been deceived, about the moment I overheard that conversation in the airport and realized everything I believed was a lie. The defense attorney tried to paint me as a vindictive wife seeking revenge on a husband who had simply made some poor business decisions. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the recordings of Daniel bragging about his con were damning in ways his lawyer couldn't explain away. Daniel was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison for his crimes against me, with additional charges pending in Germany for his other activities there. Klaus got 12 years. The other associates received lesser sentences in exchange for their cooperation. I sat in the courtroom and watched as Daniel was led away in shackles, and I felt absolutely nothing for him. No love, no hate, just a cold satisfaction that justice had been served. After the trial, I moved back to Chicago and slowly began to rebuild my life. I threw myself into my work at the publishing company, taking on projects I had neglected during my marriage. I reconnected with friends I had drifted away from when I was so focused on being the perfect wife. I started therapy to process the trauma of discovering my entire marriage had been a lie. And slowly, day by day, I began to feel like myself again. People asked me how I did it, how I managed to stay so calm and execute such a perfect revenge when my world was falling apart. The truth is, I don't think I stayed calm at all. Inside, I was screaming and crying and breaking into a million pieces. But my grandmother had taught me that strength isn't about not feeling pain. It's about feeling the pain and choosing to act anyway. She taught me that being kind doesn't mean being weak, and being trusting doesn't mean being stupid. She taught me that women are capable of anything when we decide to stop letting other people underestimate us. I also learned something important about revenge during this process. Real revenge isn't about hurting someone the way they hurt you. It's not about being cruel or vindictive or lowering yourself to their level. Real revenge is about taking back what was stolen from you, about refusing to be a victim, about standing up and saying, "I am worth more than this, and I will not accept being treated this way." Real revenge is about justice and dignity and self-respect. And when you approach it from that place, it becomes less about the person who wronged you and more about reclaiming yourself. The media attention around the case was intense for a while. I became something of a minor celebrity, the woman who took down her con artist husband with a combination of intelligence and patience. I gave a few interviews because I wanted other women in similar situations to know that they weren't alone, that there was a way out, that trusting someone doesn't make you responsible for their betrayal. But mostly I tried to stay private and focus on healing and moving forward. About 6 months after Daniel's sentencing, I received a letter from him in prison. My lawyer advised me not to read it, but I was curious. In the letter, he tried to apologize, tried to explain that he had gotten in over his head with debts and bad investments and everything just spiraled out of control. He said he had actually come to care for me during our marriage and regretted how things had ended. He asked if there was any chance I could forgive him, if we could work things out somehow, if I could help him with his appeal. I read that letter 3 times, looking for any hint of genuine remorse or understanding of what he had done to me. There was none. Even now, sitting in prison, he was still trying to manipulate me, still thinking I was naive enough to believe his lies, still hoping he could charm his way back into my good graces and convince me to help him. I wrote him back one sentence: "I understand German, and I always have." Then I threw the letter away and never looked back. Today my life looks nothing like it did when I was married to Daniel. I'm more cautious now about who I trust, but I refuse to let what he did turn me into someone bitter and closed off. I still believe in love, I just believe in it with my eyes open now. I still believe in marriage, I just know to ask more questions and pay more attention to the answers. I still believe people deserve second chances. I just know that some people will use every chance you give them to hurt you again. I've also become something of an advocate for other fraud victims. I volunteer with organizations that help people who have been scammed by romantic partners or family members. I speak at events about financial literacy and the warning signs of financial abuse. I want other people to learn from my experience without having to go through what I went through. Because the truth is that Daniel's con worked for as long as it did not. Because I was stupid, but because I was trusting. And trust is actually a beautiful thing that shouldn't be punished. The problem was never my trust. The problem was his willingness to exploit it. My grandmother passed away years before all of this happened, but I think about her every day. I think about how she taught me her language as a gift, never knowing it would one day be the key to saving my life. I think about how she taught me to be strong and smart and never let anyone make me feel small. I think about how she survived her own traumas and built a good life anyway, and I try to honor her memory by doing the same. Sometimes I talk to her in German, just to keep that connection alive, and I like to imagine she's proud of me for using everything she taught me to protect myself. Looking back now, that moment in the airport lounge feels like it happened to a different person. The woman who sat there listening to her husband mock her in a language he thought she didn't understand was someone I barely recognize. She was softer, more naive, more willing to overlook small inconsistencies because she wanted so badly to believe in the fairy tale. The woman I am now is harder in some ways, but also more authentically herself. I don't apologize for taking up space anymore. I don't second-guess my instincts. I don't let people make me feel like my kindness is a weakness to be exploited. Some people have asked me if I regret not confronting Daniel immediately when I first overheard that conversation. They wonder why I went through all the elaborate planning and evidence gathering instead of just divorcing him right away. The answer is simple. If I had confronted him immediately, he would have disappeared before I could stop him. He would have taken my money and vanished, and I would have spent years trying to track him down while he lived comfortably on what he stole from me. By staying calm and playing the long game, by using his own arrogance and assumptions against him, I was able to not only get justice but also recover what was mine and prevent him from ever doing this to anyone else. That's the thing about revenge. When it's done right, it's not hot and impulsive. It's cold and calculated, and it requires patience. It requires being willing to hurt now for a bigger payoff later. It requires keeping your emotions in check even when every fiber of your being wants to scream and cry and break things. It requires intelligence and strategy and an understanding of how systems work and how to use them to your advantage. In a way, Daniel taught me how to take him down. He taught me to be strategic and patient and to always have a plan. He just never expected me to use those lessons against him. There are still hard days. Days when I wonder if I could have seen the signs earlier, if there was something I missed that should have warned me what he was really doing. Days when I feel angry at myself for being so trusting, even though I know logically that his deception wasn't my fault. Days when I wonder if I'll ever be able to fully trust someone again, or if Daniel permanently broke something in me that can't be fixed. But those days are getting fewer and farther between, and more often than not, I feel proud of myself for how I handled everything. I've also learned to trust myself in ways I never did before. I trust my instincts now. I trust my judgment. I trust that if something feels wrong, it probably is, and I don't need to have proof or evidence to honor that feeling. I trust that I am smart enough and strong enough to handle whatever life throws at me. Because if I could survive discovering my entire marriage was a con and then systematically take down the man who tried to destroy me, I can survive anything. The other day, I was having coffee with a friend who went through a difficult divorce around the same time as mine. She was telling me how angry she still was at her ex-husband, how she couldn't move past the betrayal, how she felt stuck in that moment of discovery and couldn't seem to get beyond it. I understood completely because I felt that way too for a long time, but I told her something my therapist told me that really helped. She said that staying angry is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. The anger doesn't hurt them, it only hurts you. The key is to feel the anger, acknowledge it, let it fuel you if you need to take action, but then let it go before it consumes you. That's what I did with Daniel. I felt every ounce of rage and betrayal and hurt that his actions caused. I let those feelings motivate me to gather evidence and build a case and make sure he faced justice. But once that was done, once he was in prison and my money was recovered and my life was my own again, I made a conscious decision to let go of the anger. Not because he deserved my forgiveness, he didn't, but because I deserved to be free of him. Carrying around that hatred was giving him power over me even from behind bars, and I refused to give him one more second of my life than he had already taken. My friend asked me if I ever wished I could go back and do things differently, maybe never marry him in the first place. The question surprised me because, honestly, I had never thought about it that way. Yes, Daniel hurt me badly. Yes, he stole from me and lied to me and tried to destroy my life. But that experience also taught me things about myself I never would have learned otherwise. It taught me that I'm stronger than I thought. It taught me to pay attention to my instincts. It taught me that kindness and strength are not opposites. They can coexist in the same person. So while I wouldn't want to go through it again, I also can't regret it completely because it shaped who I am today, and I actually like who I am today. I've started dating again, carefully and slowly. I'm upfront with people now about what I've been through and what I need in a relationship. I don't hide my past or pretend it didn't happen. If someone can't handle the fact that I'm cautious and ask questions and need transparency, then they're not the right person for me. And that's okay. I'd rather be alone than settle for someone who makes me feel like I need to apologize for protecting myself. There's a man I've been seeing for a few months who seems promising. He knows my whole story and he's never made me feel bad about it. He's patient with my questions and open with his answers. He understands why I need to move slowly, and he respects that. I'm not sure where it will go, but for the first time since Daniel, I feel hopeful about the possibility of finding real love with someone honest. And if it doesn't work out, I'll survive that too. Because I've survived worse. The publishing company is thriving. I threw myself into work during the darkest days, and it paid off. We've acquired some amazing new authors and launched several bestsellers. My colleagues say I'm more focused and driven than I was before, and they're right. I have a clarity of purpose now that I didn't have when I was trying to be the perfect wife, and letting that identity overshadow everything else I was and wanted to be. I'm proud of the work we're doing, and I'm excited about the future in a way I haven't been in years. I also started learning Italian just for fun. After everything that happened with German being the language that saved me, I wanted to reclaim the joy of learning languages for their own sake rather than as a tool of espionage. Italian is beautiful and romantic and completely disconnected from any trauma, which makes it perfect. Plus, it gives me something to focus on that's just for me, that has nothing to do with work or relationships or recovery, just the simple pleasure of learning something new. Sometimes people ask me if I miss Daniel, or if there are things about him that were genuinely good that I find myself nostalgic for. The honest answer is no, because everything I thought was good about him was part of the con. The charm was calculated, the attention was manipulation. The love was performance. There's nothing to miss because none of it was real. I miss the idea of what I thought we had, but I don't miss him. How can you miss someone who never actually existed? What I do miss sometimes is the innocence of believing in someone completely. There was a sweetness to that kind of trust, even though it was naive. Now I'll never be able to give myself to someone that fully again, because I'll always be watching, always questioning, always protecting myself. That's a loss in a way, even if it's a necessary one. But I'm learning to find a balance between being smart and being open, between protecting myself and still allowing for the possibility of real connection. It's a work in progress. I've also become much better with money and finances. Before Daniel, I was comfortable but not particularly engaged with the details of my investments and assets. I trusted advisors and signed papers and didn't ask many questions. Now I'm involved in every decision. I read every document. I ask questions until I understand completely. I've educated myself about financial systems and investment strategies and legal protections. Some people might say Daniel made me paranoid, but I prefer to think he made me informed. There's power in understanding how money works and how to protect what's yours. The civil suits are finally wrapping up. We've been going after everyone who was complicit in Daniel's schemes, the lawyers who helped set up the shell companies, the accountants who hid the transactions, the banks that looked the other way when obvious fraud was happening. Some of them have settled. Others are fighting. But we're winning more than we're losing, and each victory feels like another piece of justice served. The money from these settlements is going into a fund to help other fraud victims, which feels like the right way to turn something terrible into something good. I gave a TED Talk last month about my experience. I was terrified to stand on that stage and tell my story to hundreds of people and thousands more who would watch online. But I did it because I wanted people to understand that fraud and financial abuse happen to smart, successful, educated people. It's not about being stupid or naive. It's about trusting someone who exploits that trust. The response to the talk has been overwhelming. I've received hundreds of messages from people sharing their own stories, thanking me for speaking up, asking for advice on their situations. It's been healing in a way I didn't expect, turning my private pain into something that might help others. My relationship with my family has also changed through all of this. They never particularly liked Daniel, but they supported my choice to marry him because they wanted me to be happy. After everything came out, they felt guilty for not pushing harder when they had concerns. We've had long conversations about how you can't protect someone from their own choices, how sometimes people need to make mistakes to learn from them, how love and support don't mean preventing people from living their lives even if you suspect they're making the wrong decision. These conversations have brought us closer together in unexpected ways. I've also had to rebuild my sense of self outside of being someone's wife. For 8 years, so much of my identity was wrapped up in being Mrs. Zand. Daniel Weber. I made decisions based on what would be good for us as a couple. I turned down opportunities because they would require too much time away from home. I compromised on things I wanted because I thought that's what partnership meant. Now I'm relearning who Sophie is, as just Sophie, not as someone's wife or partner, just as an individual with her own dreams and goals and desires. It's harder than I expected, but also strangely liberating. The nightmares have mostly stopped. For months after the arrest, I would wake up in a panic, dreaming that Daniel had escaped or that the whole thing had been reversed and he was coming after me. My therapist said it was normal, that my nervous system was processing the trauma and learning that I was safe now. She taught me grounding techniques and breathing exercises, and slowly the nightmares became less frequent. Now I sleep through most nights, which feels like its own kind of victory. I've thought a lot about the concept of closure. People talk about needing closure after a relationship ends, needing that final conversation or explanation that allows you to move on, but I realized I don't need closure from Daniel. I have all the closure I need. I know what he did, I know why he did it, and I know he's facing the consequences. There's nothing he could say to me now that would change anything or make me feel better. The closure came from my own actions, from taking control of the situation and refusing to be a victim. That's the only closure that matters. Looking back at that woman sitting in the airport lounge, the woman whose life was about to be turned upside down, I wish I could tell her that she's stronger than she knows. That she's going to survive this and come out the other side as someone more authentic and powerful. That the pain she's about to experience is real and valid, but it won't destroy her. That she has everything she needs inside herself to not just survive, but to thrive. But that woman had to go through what she went through to become who I am now. There was no shortcut around the pain, only through it. The most unexpected gift from all of this has been the community I've found among other fraud victims and survivors. Women and men who understand what it's like to have someone you love betray you systematically, who understand the particular humiliation of having to explain to friends and family that your entire life was a lie, who understand the rage and the grief and the slow process of rebuilding. We support each other through the hard days and celebrate the victories together. This community has become a source of strength I never expected to have. I've also become an advocate for changes in financial laws to better protect people from domestic fraud. Current laws make it surprisingly easy for someone with access to joint accounts and shared assets to steal from their spouse, especially if they're sophisticated about it. I've been working with legislators to close some of these loopholes and create better protections. It's slow work, but it feels important. If I can help prevent even one person from going through what I went through, all of this will have been worth it. The question I get asked most often is whether I believe in karma, whether I think Daniel got what he deserved, or if I had to make it happen myself. The truth is, I think it's both. I believe that people who hurt others eventually face consequences, but I also believe that sometimes you have to be willing to be the instrument of those consequences. Justice doesn't always happen automatically. Sometimes you have to fight for it. Sometimes you have to be smart and strategic and willing to do whatever it takes to make sure the right thing happens. That's not revenge, that's accountability. Daniel will be eligible for parole in about 12 years if he behaves himself in prison. I've already written letters to the parole board for when that time comes, explaining the full extent of his crimes and why he should serve his complete sentence. I've documented everything he did to me and the other women he victimized. I've included the recording of him bragging about his con. I want to make absolutely certain that when he does eventually get out, he faces as many barriers as possible to ever doing this to anyone else again. I've also put alerts on my credit and financial accounts that will notify me if anyone tries to access them or open new accounts in my name. I've changed all my passwords and security questions. I've taken every precaution I can think of to protect myself from any future attempts he might make to hurt me. Some people might say I'm being paranoid, but I prefer to think of it as being prepared. Daniel proved that he's willing to go to extraordinary lengths to steal from people. I'd be foolish not to take him seriously as a threat even from prison. The civil suit against Daniel personally was symbolic more than anything, since he has no assets left, everything was seized or returned to me and his other victims. But I wanted him to have a judgment against him that would follow him for the rest of his life. Even after he gets out of prison, he'll owe millions in restitution that he'll never be able to pay. It will affect his ability to get loans, buy property, rebuild his life. It's a permanent reminder that actions have consequences, and you can't just steal from people and move on like nothing happened. I've started mentoring young women who are getting married or entering serious relationships. I share my story not to make them cynical about love, but to help them understand the importance of maintaining their own financial independence and identity within a partnership. I teach them about keeping separate accounts, about understanding all financial documents they sign, about paying attention to their instincts if something feels wrong. I want them to be able to trust and love fully while also protecting themselves. It's a delicate balance, but it's possible. The company I work for has implemented new policies around financial transparency and support for employees dealing with fraud or financial abuse. We've created a confidential helpline and resources for anyone who needs them. We've included financial literacy training in our professional development programs. My experience has sparked important conversations about how we support each other through personal crises, and I'm proud that something positive has come out of my situation. I've also learned to be more forgiving of myself. For a long time, I beat myself up over every missed red flag, every time I chose to believe Daniel instead of questioning him. But my therapist helped me understand that I was making the best decisions I could with the information I had at the time. Daniel was skilled at deception. He had done this before. He knew exactly how to manipulate people. It wasn't my fault that I fell for it. The only person responsible for his actions is him. There are moments of unexpected joy now, moments where I catch myself laughing genuinely, or feeling excited about the future, or just appreciating the simple pleasure of a quiet morning with coffee and a book. For a while after everything happened, I wasn't sure I'd ever feel that kind of lightness again. But it comes more and more often now, these moments of realizing that I'm actually okay, that I've survived and I'm building something new and good from the ashes of what was destroyed. I've thought about writing a book about my experience. Several publishers have approached me about it. Part of me wants to because I think the story could help people, but another part wants to just move on and leave this chapter behind. I haven't decided yet. Maybe someday when there's more distance between me and the events. Or maybe I'll decide that I've shared enough and the rest of my healing can be private. Either way is okay. The strength I discovered in myself during those weeks of gathering evidence and working with the FBI is something I carry with me now. I know I'm capable of doing hard things, of staying calm under pressure, of being strategic and patient when it matters. That knowledge is empowering in every area of my life. When I face challenges at work or in my personal life, I remind myself that I took down a sophisticated con artist. Whatever I'm dealing with now is manageable in comparison. I've also become much more aware of how common financial abuse is, especially within marriages and intimate relationships. It's something people don't talk about much because there's shame associated with it, shame at having been fooled or taken advantage of by someone you loved. But the more we talk about it, the more people realize they're not alone, and the less power abusers have to keep their victims silent. I try to be open about my experience whenever it might help someone else recognize their situation and get help. The justice system has its flaws, and there were moments during this process when I was frustrated by how slowly things moved or how complicated everything was. But ultimately, it worked. Daniel is in prison. His assets were seized. Other victims were able to recover at least some of what they lost. The system isn't perfect, but when you work within it strategically and you have good people on your side, it can deliver real justice. That's something I didn't fully believe before this experience. I've learned to celebrate small victories. Every day that I get up and move forward is a victory. Every time I make a financial decision with confidence is a victory. Every time I trust someone new, even in a small way, is a victory. Recovery isn't one big moment. It's 1,000 small moments of choosing to keep going, keep growing, keep believing that better things are possible. And those small moments add up to a completely transformed life. My grandmother's German lessons gave me more than just language skills. They gave me a secret weapon I didn't know I had until I needed it. They gave me a connection to her strength and resilience that sustained me through the darkest time of my life. They gave me proof that you never know what skills or knowledge will turn out to be crucial. Every experience, everything you learn, every relationship you have, all of it becomes part of who you are and might be exactly what you need at some future moment you can't predict. If I could go back and tell that woman in the airport lounge one thing, it would be this: you're about to discover exactly how strong you are, and it's going to change everything. You're going to hurt in ways you didn't know were possible. You're going to question everything you thought you knew about yourself and about love. You're going to feel broken and lost and terrified, but you're also going to fight back, and you're going to win. And on the other side of this nightmare, you're going to find a version of yourself that you didn't know existed, someone fierce and wise and unbreakable. It's going to be worth it. I promise you, it's going to be worth it. The moral of my story isn't about revenge, not really. It's about refusing to be defined by what someone else did to you. It's about taking back your power when someone tries to steal it. It's about the fact that strength comes in many forms, including the strength to trust, the strength to love, and the strength to walk away when that trust and love are betrayed. Daniel thought my kindness was weakness. He thought my trust made me a perfect victim. He was wrong. Those qualities didn't make me weak. They just meant that when I finally decided to fight back, he never saw it coming. Today, I'm rebuilding a life that's authentically mine, not built around someone else's lies or manipulation. I'm making choices based on what I want, not what I think a good wife should want. I'm investing in friendships and interests and dreams that are mine alone, and I'm learning that life after betrayal can be just as full and beautiful as life before, maybe even more so because it's built on truth instead of illusion. My husband didn't know I spoke German until his words about me exposed him completely. That secret knowledge saved my financial future and possibly my life. But more than that, it taught me that we all have hidden strengths we don't discover until we're tested. Mine happened to be language skills and a quiet determination to seek justice. Yours might be something entirely different, but trust me when I say this, when the moment comes and you need to be strong, you will be. You'll surprise yourself with what you're capable of, and whatever doesn't destroy you really does make you stronger, as long as you choose to use that strength to build something new instead of staying trapped in bitterness about what was taken from you. The greatest revenge isn't hurting the person who hurt you, it's healing yourself and thriving despite what they did. It's refusing to let their betrayal diminish your capacity for joy and love and trust. It's taking everything they meant to destroy and using it as the foundation for something better. That's what I've done. That's what I'm still doing every single day. And if my story can help even one person find the strength to do the same, then sharing all of this, reliving all of this pain, will have been worth it.